Welcome back to Studio Visit. This is Coffee is Sacred Part 3. Now we have all the boring stuff kind of finished, and we're just going to be working on creating texture using a mix of coffee and gesso. So in the last episode, I kind of just started this off, and now we're just going to keep going. So what can I say about what I'm doing here? Basically, I have a certain kind of shape or motion gesture that I kind of have in mind that I want to follow through with this coffee texture. So I just kind of have it in my mind, kind of roughed out. I know where the image is going to go, so I kind of want the coffee texture to flow from the negative space to the positive space of the image. I want a lot of randomness. I want a lot of texture. Basically, I'm kind of setting up a bit of a challenge for myself, painting wise, because I'm gonna have to deal with all this texture and creating the image. But by the end of it always ends up for me to be more interesting if there's something I have to deal with. I really like the Maillard, reaction color that you get from the toasted coffee beans, really mixing with the gesso gives it that kind of creamy, almost raw, canvasy look. So it becomes like an underpainting or another texture that I can use to actually get to adding, oil pigments. I kind of have the LED section taped off, so that's going to be really satisfying when I peel that off. And so I'm just really trying to get that gestural shape going. And in my hand is it's a trowel that I use for drywalling, but it works great as a as a palette knife. So I'm going to be honest here, and I wanted a lot more coffee grounds at this point, but I guess I just couldn't drink the coffee fast enough. So I do kind of leave it at a certain point, and I come back and I'll add more after I've had a few more pots of coffee and I created some grounds. The only thing is that um, wet grounds don't mix well with the gesso. Not so much that it does anything weird, but it just waters it down too much. So I really have to wait for the grounds to dry. So I kind of have like a little drying area, and I don't know, things in Vancouver just don't dry quickly. Takes a while. So I kind of have some on the go, and just the kind of dried stuff that I had was it just isn't enough. So when this canvas is on the ground, it pretty much fills up my studio space. So I only really have like a few inches all around to kind of straddle and work around this. So it kind of, I remember when I was doing this, kind of felt like, I was any second I was going to fall into the canvas and just like destroy everything. So that's also why you kind of see me like uh, being as cautious as I am around this time. So I'm mixing a little bit more of my coffee gesso with the, I guess, another batch coffee grounds. And I love coffee even before I really started researching its history with Honduras. I drink it. I love its stimulating effects. It's super obvious how important it is to culture. Just how it's everywhere. One of the few recession-proof industries is probably the coffee industry. So that's why it's also super important that when I buy my coffee and I like create work, I'm buying the Copan coffee. Uh, it's not always possible to know really, like, you can know if it's from the region of Copan, but there's a good chance that it's brewed by the Chortli people, but they're it's just really hard because I don't live in Honduras. My family's from there, uh, but unless you're kind of in the culture, all the time, it's really hard to be able to recognize exactly, what is authentic or how authentic it is. So while I try, I'm not going to say that there's any that I'm not gonna accidentally just buy some knockoff uh, coffee that's kind of made just for the tourists, because I know that happens. That happens a lot, and that's okay because Honduras is a country. You gotta make it. You gotta survive. But the history in Honduras, with coffee, it's very complicated. Honduras, has a history. It's not the uh, best country for human rights. It's a lot of the press is pretty negative around Honduras, but at the same time, there isn't a lot of awareness in Canada, uh, in the United States, except for when that big caravan kind of showed up like a couple years ago, and then all of a sudden people are like, oh well, we can't let these people in, you know. And you know, I also know that coffee itself, it's not an indigenous uh, plant to Honduras or the New World. It's African in origin. So I'm super interested in that coffee itself has this diasporic relationship in Latin America, where it just tons and tons of it is grown. It's I think it's surpassed the banana uh, industry in Honduras. where bananas used to be the biggest thing. But the funny thing about these like amazingly profitable industries in Latin America is that they are pretty much all owned by American corporations, and even when they're not the primary industry, like the coffee berries when they're harvested and processed, they're like sold for an incredibly low amount to these American corporations. Really, basically just like they'll roast it and they'll package it and they'll distribute it, and the markup is amazingly huge. Uh, and it's always been kind of a confusing thing that these countries, which you know Canada and America and Europe rely on functioning, are kind of not even really considered in sharing the prosperity, even though like I've always kind of likened coffee to spice, which is uh, this fictional thing from the Dune books, where if spice doesn't exist, society pretty much as we know it doesn't exist. That's kind of how coffee is. Like the ability for people to work as much as they work and to produce as much as they produce, we pretty much need to be stimulated all the time. And coffee is kind of like it's the main game in stimulation. So I know like I wouldn't be able to, you know, work for 8 hours straight, without at least a cup of coffee. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I can drink tea," and yeah, tea is another stimulant. Um, and there's tons of others, but if you just look at the numbers, coffee's huge. Especially, once again, my focus is Honduras. Yeah, but I'm in Canada. I live in Canada. My family's been here since 1978. So really, my perspective, it's the diaspora of kind of being somewhat connected to one world, being somewhat connected to another world. Not quite Canadian, not quite Honduran. I'm also part German, but I was raised by my Honduran mom, so that's kind of really my only point of reference. So this work is just an interest in this kind of slice of the world that you know I I don't fully understand, but it's also really informs you know my my own you know personality, like how I grew up, the food that I eat, how my family acts, the way they see the world. So we have a pretty good um, texture going on. This corner here that I'm really working on, there's going to be a lot of negative space, so I really want to work it. And the opposite area, that's kind of where like the main painting is going to exist. So I'm really treating this area because I know there isn't going to have a lot of uh, paint on it. So this is gonna have to serve as part of the painting that is going to integrate into the rest of it. I have to make some decisions now. There's certain points in a painting where I'm just really just working on feeling, um, not really doing a lot of planning. But then, you kind of have to stop once in a while and just take into account what you just did and see if there's anything you missed, anything that needs to be improved upon. So that's kind of what's happening whenever I kind of stop and just stare at it for a while. You're going to see that happening a lot of kind of dead space where I'm just really thinking. So I guess, yeah, it's it's feeling like I need more of the coffee pigment on the actual canvas. It's probably a little too, I don't want to say like watered down, I guess gessoed down. And when I actually do this and throw, basically coffee grounds all over, um, some wet gesso, the coffee grounds actually bleed a little. Like whatever pigments in them, they kind of steep. So now this layer of texture is put down. I probably should just leave that tape on, but a lot of times I just can't wait. I just gotta see if it's turning out all right. So just pulling up the tape, checking it out, making sure that you know it's gonna work. I'm gonna be able to lay down um, some EL strip right there in that bare section. And it's gonna be kind of nestled in all of that texture. So I'm pretty happy with where this is right now. So it's time to take a break and it's time to wash my hands. Okay, here we are. It is another day. You probably can't tell because I pretty much have two painting outfits. I kind of have my more breathable old UBC shirt and you know shorts combination, and then I have a more serious oil painting getup, which you'll kind of see in a bit. So just want some fresh air. Even though this room is like pretty tiny, I really do enjoy the sliding balcony door just because I can get like a lot of air. So I only really wear gloves for two reasons. One, because I'm handling something that's gonna, you know, wreck my skin, or if I want to make sure that my fingers, the oils in my hands or something doesn't mess up anything, and I think this is the former where yeah, I'm going to place the LED strip on, and pretty much the only way I can really think of doing it that is going to last and isn't going to be affected by the oil paint is by using epoxy. So I'm going to be mixing a little epoxy uh, and placing it really quickly along that little channel that I made with the masking tape, and then I'm going to have to fix it all down and get this strip as flat as I can. So I'm trying to be super careful here because once that epoxy's on, if I don't do it right, I can ruin basically all of the work that I've been doing up till now. So I got to make sure everything's long enough, make sure that it looks right. Here's a new angle. So I cut a really tiny uh, little notch into the canvas so that I can hide all the wires, and it'll kind of look like the EL, strip has been just plastered onto the canvas, uh, and the wires are not part of this painting. It's more about the block of color that I want to lay down than any overt reference to technology. Um, the blue is because this is going to be an overwhelmingly warm painting. The coffee berries have like lots of reds and yellows, and coffee itself has lots of browns and oranges. Um, so, so it's going to be a very warm painting, and this little bit of color that's kind of cutting through the painting is really there to do exactly that, to disrupt the painting because it's the my own um, perspective on the painting. Like it isn't perfect. There's a lot of um, awkwardness, in when I am, like I said, I'm you know Honduran German Canadian, creating a painting that is rooted specifically in the Honduran coffee industry and the relationship between that. So there isn't really a clean way that I can create this representation. And so the best way that I can think of that I can resolve that is to show that there is problematic um, aspects to the painting, visually. Like there's going to be disruption in some way, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm totally uh, willing to show that, or even like represent that, because I still think that the that my the research that I've done into coffee, and my own perspective is valid. And I think it's meaningful to me. I just have to find ways to show that it isn't fully resolved. I'm using this cheap plastic palette knife because I'm pretty much going to ruin it with this epoxy. I'm also super cheap. So I am just mixing like the bare amount of epoxy. I don't really want to waste it. Also, this stuff is super toxic, so I also don't want to like mix too much, because I know that, like, you know, uh, our bodies can only filter like so much toxins, and I want to keep my exposure to the bare minimum. I know I can my body's pretty good at filtering out you know things, so I'm gonna let it do its job, but I'm not gonna overtax it. when adhering anything, it's always a good idea to put a little bit of your adhesive on both surfaces that you're going to be sticking together. It's yeah, that way you make sure that you're going to get good contact. 'Cause that's really uh, just putting the adhesive and having the adhesive touch is only really like one part of making sure that you get um, get something to like glue itself on. The next thing is really pressure, creating seals, like a really tight seal, getting air bubbles out. So that's really what I'm trying to do here is making sure that I'm like pressing, um, yeah, very evenly. So I'm actually using this roll of tape. So because my fingertips are not the right shape, I need something like flat, but also something that can evenly distribute pressure. So now I have everything pretty much in place, and I'm just gonna tape it up, let it dry, and yeah, then we're going to finally um, get into the actual oil painting process. So yeah, we've spent about 3 hours just setting up this canvas so I can put some paint onto it. And yeah, there we go. Um, I actually really like uh, how it looks right now, and it's actually giving me a lot of ideas to create something abstract in the future. I just have to really sit on it and think about what this painting as an abstraction would be. Because right now, like the reason I'm liking it is purely aesthetic. Uh, the gesture and the line, it's very easy to uh, take in to see, and it's hard to tell because the painting's like not super huge um, on the screen, but it's about the size of me. And so when I'm looking at it, just from my eyes, it actually is fully engulfing, especially in this like tiny little room that I'm creating it in. So we'll see. We'll see how this kind of evolves. So now I'm just no, I guess I'm triple checking at this point, just making sure that um, the EL strip is square. Um, I find, yeah, like having, eyeballing things a lot of the time, it might seem right because maybe I'm looking at it from a odd angle. But I think that our eyes and our mind register well because we're three-dimensional beings. As we walk around objects and we start kind of registering them from all these different angles, we start realizing when things are not quite, uh, you know, centered or straight or square. And so because I'm really into this painting. I don't have a lot of opportunity to really like move around and take it in from all these different angles. Just measuring it is really great. And so here I kind of have like the photo that I'm working on, and you see I drew this blue line, like right kind of cutting through this gesture. And so that's pretty much the representation of this EL panel. And I'm going to take that image, and that's what I'm going to be working from as I paint. So I have my wax pencil in hand, my image, and I'm just going to kind of um, eyeball and rough out the kind of areas that I want to paint. And because my process isn't heavy on, uh, kind of in contradiction to what I just said about measuring the EL strip, I try not to measure my representational drawings too much because I can, like, I've done it, and while they give off the to me they give off the impression of something that it's proportionally correct, and it looks good in some way, but it always feels a little stiff because I'm kind of really restricting my gestural movements to kind of fit in uh, to fit the proportions of like whatever I'm drawing. So there's some times where I want that to really feel like really measured and really exact and to look uh, realistic, for lack of a better word. But in this painting, because I'm really working with a lot of texture, and the texture is gonna create some weird visual things in itself, and the colors that I'm painting on top of, like there's gonna be like a few layers of kind of underpainting with this. It's not really super important that it's realistic. It's more important that this idea, this kind of large swooping feeling of this hand cradling these coffee cherries is much more important. And yeah, here we go. This is yeah, the rough drawing of the painting. So yeah, next episode's gonna be exciting stuff. We're going to lay some paint down here, some color. Well, some underpainting, but it's painting. So let's check this out in a week.